Thank you. Can you hear me? No? Just a second. Okay, let's just wait until this starts working as it should. I can say hello in the meantime. Is it working now? No? Should I switch to the other mic? Is it working now? No, not yet. Now? Okay. It works now. Perfect. So let's start. Okay. Today we'll talk about serverless. Oops. I'm just kidding. This one is not the. Yeah. So when you're preparing for presentations, things like this can happen. And as you saw, it happens with the microphone, sometimes with presentation. That's not part of my presentation. Can I get my presentation back? No? Okay. So yeah, it's the same with web development. So when you start learning JavaScript and web development in general, hopefully my presentation will come back at some point. Okay. So when you start learning HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, everything is really, really hard in the beginning. You need to learn like HTML and how all those tags are working, and then, okay, it should be, no? Oh, come on. Yeah, and then after that, you learn CSS and you try to like float divs and things like that, and that's not trivial, of course, and cables are not trivial, of course. And then after that, you learn JavaScript. I guess I should try another adapter. Excuse me for this. I guess I should switch to another computer for my presentations because dongles are always. Yes. No, not yet. Okay. I guess I can go without presentation. So, and then you learn CSS, JavaScript, and things like that, and you finally build your first application, and you want to show it to your friends. You go to your friends, show like first few things, like show your application on your computer. Everyone is happy for you and things like that. And then at some point, you just want to send your presentation to your friend from, for example, Canada or something like that. And that's where you hit the first roadblock. That's not trivial at all because you need to deploy your application. And in order to deploy your application, all those skills that you learned are of course great for creating an application, but they're not enough to like deploy your application. So you need to learn a bunch of more things. You go to Google and try to find what you need for like for being able to send your presentation to your friend. And most of the time you need something called server. So I'll just wait for a second and see if we'll manage to get back my presentation because it would be helpful.
Like slides and everything?
Yeah. You have nice slides. Come on. Yeah. Is it working? No. It's on. Perfect. Yes. I will not connect this anymore. So I said, you created an awesome application. You want to show it to your friends. You do that. Then you want to send it to your friend from Canada. And of course, it doesn't work without a server. So you search online. You realize that you need a server. So of course, the second thing you do is basically go and buy a server. And now that you have a server, everything should work fine, right? You can just take your code and put it on top of that server, and everything works, right? Well, not really, because you need to learn many different things. First, you need some kind of operating system. Most of the time, you get that with a cloud server, but then you need Nginx and things like that, and many other frameworks, libraries, and things like that. And you just want to show your application to your friend, not to do anything special. So there should be an easy way to do that, right? how simple should like deploying a single page or static web application hosting should be? Well, it should be really, really simple. It should be like coding everything, focusing on your code, and then clicking one button or running one command. And it should be there for everyone. So it should be kind of like fast one command or one button deployments. It should be cheap because just one person or few people will use your application. It's even better if it's free, if you just want to show it to your friend or something like that. But if people start using your application, it should have some kind of, caching and things like that. And yeah, that feature list definitely sounds familiar. And if you're a front-end developer, you probably heard about services such as Netlify or GitHub Pages or Aws S3 and things like that. All of them allows you to serve your like front-end application easily and show it to other people. But that feature list also sounds like something else, something called serverless. And serverless is mostly a backend thing. If you search about it, you'll see that you can write different programming languages and things like that. But I think that serverless is a backend thing that gives superpowers, mostly to front-end developers. And I'll try to explain why. But before we continue, let me introduce myself. Yeah. So, I'm Slobodan Stojanovic. I work as a CTO in Cloud Horizon, small Serbian-Canadian company, and we also do a product called Vacation Tracker for tracking leaves and things like that in Slack. You can request a vacation and someone can approve your vacation through Slack. I also co-author of serverless applications with Node.js book, which is beginner-friendly book published by Manning Publications. And I'm also AWS serverless hero. I unfortunately don't have a cape. I asked AWS to provide that, but they didn't. And you can follow me on Twitter or read things about serverless on the website I'm writing for with my friends. So let's be efficient today and go back to serverless. What is that serverless thing? Some people would say that you probably have less servers with serverless, right? Well, some people will argue that you don't have servers anymore and things like that. And of course, there are people that will tell you that there are even more servers somewhere in the background now. I would say that no one should care about that. Of course, except your service providers such as AWS, Google, Microsoft, IBM, and others, because someone still need to maintain these things. So to understand serverless, the easiest way is to go a step back and to find out what do we really need to make up our applications functional. So first, as we said, we need to have some kind of a server. We can buy it or rent it. Please don't buy servers. Then you need to install some kind of operating system to it. Then you need to set up some libraries, frameworks, things like that. Finally, you need to write your code and to have your business logic ready. Then after that, you need to deploy that application to that server, and then people can use it. But the process is not ended there, because you need to make sure that your application works. You need some kind of monitoring and things like that. And then after that, you still need to maintain your server, all those libraries. There are some critical issues and things like that, so you need to install updates, software patches, and things like that. Who remembers Melt and Spectra? Few of you, okay. And then, of course, you need to fix your application to add new features, to fix the bugs. When people start using it, you'll have a long list of features and things that you want to do. But if you talk to your users or your client, most of those things are not really important. So let's see what's really important for your client from this long list. Well, oh, sorry, I guess we skip this. Okay, so your users and clients really don't care about most of those things. They care about your business logic, not because they like your code. They care because they want to use your application. Then they care about monitoring, not really because of your monitoring and things like that, but they want that application to work properly all the time. And also they care about your fixes and updates, because they want application that is secure and up to date, and application that will have new features from time to time. So, of course, at some point there was a cloud, and cloud helps with some things for sure. But cloud will help you with buying or renting server. That will be easier than ever. And then you get that cloud server with operating system, so you don't need to care about that. It also simplifies some other things, but you still need to be in charge of all those things. Well, serverless, I would say, is just the next step of the cloud. It's like cloud version 2.0. And it will help you with setuping the server. You don't need to do that anymore. It will help you with managing server and software updates. It will automatically do that for you. And it will also simplify some other things, such as deployment. It's much easier now. Or, for example, making sure that your application works. It will monitor some things for you and things like that. So let's compare these lists. This is the things that your users or clients care about. And this is the list of the things that serverless helps you do, focus on. So these two lists are quite similar. So you have some idea that you maybe can use that serverless thingy to build your applications. Well, there's another really, really important question that people ask all the time. Why is it called serverless when you still have servers and things like that? And it's really hard to explain that, but my friend has the best explanation ever. He said that AWS Lambda and other services are serverless the same way Wi-Fi is wireless. So when we use our phones, we don't really need wires, but there are some routers somewhere over there, and there are wires, such as wires in my presentation that someone else will fix, not me, fortunately. So yeah, let's not talk about that anymore. Okay, what are the benefits of serverless? Well, obvious benefit is managed infrastructure. So you can write some function or things like that, and someone else will spin up the servers, do everything in the background for you. It's really cheap. I'll show you some numbers a bit later, so just trust me that it's cheap right now. It has auto-scaling and auto-failover. So if just one person is using, for example, your application, and in the next second you have like 1,000 other users loading your application, it will just work. You don't need to do anything for that. It has full isolation for each function, so it's really hard to hack those things. There are some ways, of course, but it's much harder than with the traditional servers. And it's quite easy to start with. It's a beginner-friendly. And there's one more thing that I really, really like, and that's pricing model of serverless. And I'll just quickly go through that. Well, you're paying just for used capacity, not really reserved capacity. You don't need to plan how many servers do you need and pay in advance and things like that. Basically, you pay everything for execution. If no one is using your application, you will not pay for anything. There's just a small cost, of course, for storage. If you store too many data and things like that, it will cost you something. And for example, I'm mostly working with AWS, but others have similar pricing models. But for AWS, first million requests will be free each month. Next million requests will cost 20 cents. So it's really, really cheap. Well, basically, you can probably use that serverless thingy to send your application to your friend Ben, and it will probably cost you $0. Well, okay, we understand pricing model, but that doesn't really give superpowers to front-end developers. Let's see the things that actually can give some superpowers to front-end developers. And to understand the superpowers, let's talk about like what's not that easy for front-end developers. There's that thing with full-stack developers. All of us want to be full-stack developers, but all of us are kind of more front-end or more back-end. You can do both things, but you're really good at one thing, and the other thing is like much harder and things like that. At least that's for me. So let's. So I don't want you to just trust me. So I'll tell you a few stories about people that really use this serverless in production. And let me tell you two stories. Who heard about CodePen? A lot of you. So CodePen is an awesome website. So whenever you want to write some like small experiments or even bigger experiments with animations, things like that, you can go to CodePen and write whatever you want, including TypeScript and Sass and things like that. And CodePen will magically in the background transfer those files that your browser can't read to some backend, and that backend will do some black magic, and then your browser will get CSS, JavaScript, and HTML, and you'll be able to see all those amazing experiments and things like that. And so when we talked to CodePen like a year ago or something like that, they had 250 million requests for that black magic thing in the background each month. And how many DevOps and backend people do you think they use to be able to maintain and serve that thing to all the users? Exactly. Yes. I have even animation. So let me tell you a story about their team. So they have team of mostly front-end developers. They have one DevOps person, and they work with Ruby on Rails. Their website, when you go to your to their website, it's Ruby on Rails application. And then they have a lot of preprocessors that are converting, for example, Sass to CSS or TypeScript to JavaScript. And all of them needs full isolation because some of them can allow users to, I don't know, do some things that they don't want users to do. And then they have like 200,000 requests per hour in peak. So when there's some popular things, it can go up to 200,000 requests each hour. And they never know when these peaks will happen. For example, you can create some experiment and then tweet it, and then someone can retweet that, and many people will come to. I should stop using space because it's like clicking twice. Sorry. It's spoiling my presentation. So yeah. Then they started with architecture similar to this. They have that big Ruby on Rails application. It's connected to a database, and then they try to have a separate Ruby application that will just have all those preprocessors. But the thing was that they need to maintain and scale that really fast. And also, if these things are not really isolated well, people can use Sass to run some functions and things like that and access things on the rest of that server, and then it can probably affect other things, and everything just can break down. So they had a lack of resources. They could use containers and things like that, but they don't have enough people to manage that, and they don't have a huge budget because we don't pay for their service. So their DevOps engineer tried to find something that will work for them with like less maintenance, and they found serverless. So their front-end developers tried to write the Sass converter, and everything worked fine. So in the end, they migrated all of their converter preprocessors to serverless. And now architecture looks something like this. So the front part of the application, like a website and the database, stays the same. And then whenever you want to see something that use TypeScript and Sass, for example, that will be sent to some API gateway on AWS. That's the API that will just auto-scale for you, and you pay for executions. That will trigger some function in the background. That function will see what it needs to convert, and then invoke few other functions that will just pre-process those things in the background and return the result. It's faster and cheaper, so let's see the results. First, they have full isolation. One function cannot see what's in the other function because they are like completely separated things managed by AWS, so they don't care about that. They have auto-scaling, so they can serve up to 5,000 parallel requests at the same moment without a problem, and they can increase that number if they need by just writing to AWS. And their cost of infrastructure for 250 million users is a bit less than $1,200 per month, and they can optimize this cost, but they didn't spend that much time on optimizing it. They can probably get it down to $300 per month. And their DevOps guy can focus on Ruby on Rails part and work just on that, and they have front-end developers with some superpowers. So that's the first story. The second story, sorry for going a bit faster, we have a bit less time, is a story about my startup called Vacation Tracker. So basically, started as an in-company hackathon idea. We had like 15 people at that moment, and it was hard for us to like manage who's on vacation, who will be on vacation, and things like that. So at the end, we created a small startup inside company, and we assigned just one developer to that. He had some small help from time to time. He's mostly front-end developer. He did some backend, but he's not an expert in backend for sure. And we started with Slack chatbot, some API, and finally a single-page application for the dashboard. To minimize the initial cost and to be able to run really fast, we started with serverless, of course. And the current state of our system is something like this. So we have some API gateway, again, it's auto-scaling. Then we have like different services for billing, for API, for Slack events. Those things are talking to like DynamoDB, Stripe, many other things in the background. All of those things are just auto-scaling, so we don't need to do anything. Well, this image is definitely not true because it's a simplified view. Real view looks more like, prepare yourself, this. This is like 60% of our code, and it looks like scary here, but it's not that scary. All those things are small functions and things like that. I never this view. It was more like for showing off. So let's see the results. We have almost 200 teams using our product. A bit more than 100 teams are paying for it every month. And our current cost of infrastructure is literally $0. It was actually 17 cents last month because we had some issue and things like that. Yeah, I'll get to that. We have really fast development cycles. It's easier for us to refactor things because, as you saw, everything is in a small function, so we can just take one function, do whatever we want with it. And we have reusable parts for our next products. For example, we have Slack part that is reusable, or subscriptions part and things like that. It works something like this. You type /vacation, it triggers Lambda function, answers to you. Whenever user clicks on things, it will trigger functions in the background. And yeah, that's it. Well, I have one more question. Is there anyone that knows how much your latest bug costs? Oh, no? Well, kind of calculated the cost of our bug a few weeks ago, and the cost was like $2.37 per week. And actually, we didn't pay for everything because we have free tiers, so we ended up paying for 17 cents. So, should you even fix bugs that are like less than 20 bucks a month or things like that? Well, I don't think so, because unless they are affecting user experience and things like that, making some other issues in your system and things like that. But it's really easy with this. It's really easy for us to calculate things and to see if we want to fix something or not, and to roll out things really quickly. And it's easy to show to business people that it makes sense to fix some things because you can measure basically everything, because everything is in separate functions and things like that. So we have some front-end developers with superpowers. Well, you see how people are using serverless, so let's see how you can start with serverless, and I'll try to give you some recipes. So first things that most of the front-end developers wants to do is deploying a single-page application that you just finished. Well, you can do that with serverless by using two services called Aws S3, actually Amazon S3 and CloudFront. S3 is basically a service where you put static files and things like that. So you can store images, you can store HTML files and things like that. And CloudFront is basically a CDN. It will give you cache and things like that. I'll push the presentation. I'll tweet the link to a presentation after my presentation, so you don't need to like take notes for everything. Basically, you just upload your single-page application to S3, then set up a few things in CloudFront, and everything just should work. If you don't want to do things like that, like learning how to set up everything, there are tools. For example, we created a small tool called Scotty.js. It's like beam me up, Scotty. So you can type one command, and your application will go to some CDN and things like that. You, of course, need to have AWS account, and you'll just get URLs in the end. Well, the other thing that many people try with when they work with JavaScript and Node.js is basically Express.js. Who used Express.js? Who tried to deploy Express.js application? Okay. So it's kind of similar. There's a thing called AWS Lambda, which manages the code. So basically, you take your Express application, change one line of the code, deploy it to AWS Lambda function, and then put some kind of API gateway in front of it. And the benefits are something like this. So basically, you have your Lambda function with your Express application, and when users start using, that thing will just scale and serve up to 1,000 people out of the box. If you need more, then you can easily just write a ticket to AWS support, and they will increase these numbers for you. There's a small tutorial how to do this on this URL, but again, I'll tweet the slides if you want to see it. But that's not the best solution, because right now, basically, you have API gateway that handles API requests and HTTP requests and things like that. If you deploy whole Express application inside, you're basically having two web servers, two HTTP gateways, one in API gateway and another one in each function. So you're doing twice, like you're twice going through HTTP. So you can do a better API, and the better API would look something like this. You don't use Express.js, instead you just write a serverless function. Maybe I'll have some time to show you how. Deploy that to AWS Lambda, put API gateway in front of it, and you can connect it to some database. Remember that you should probably use the database that will scale automatically. Otherwise, you can just kill your database. We did that a few times because functions will just scale and database will not. So it's not fun. And there are, of course, tools that you can use to do that. Most of the time, we're using Claudia.js and Claudia API Builder because they're really, really simple. And then everything looks similar to Express. You just need another, you don't have another HTTP server inside each function. And the good thing is that that will run faster, and with serverless, faster means cheaper because you'll pay for number of requests, but also for duration of each request, because they'll charge you for 100 milliseconds of, so you're not paying servers anymore on a monthly base. You're not paying your servers or applications anymore, even on an hourly base or minute base. It's milliseconds, literally. So if your application runs 100 milliseconds, it will be cheaper than application that runs 200 milliseconds. It forces you to write more performant applications, which I really, really love. And you can use these things, for example, for server-side rendering and things like that, which is really cool. But I would say that APIs are boring. They are so like 2000 something, and people are using GraphQL today, right? Who's using GraphQL? Cool. There's a thing for GraphQL too. It's called Aws App Sync, and it works something like this. So you have serverless GraphQL. It will just scale for you and have all those things. It have pre-configured access to AWS data sources. So whenever you want to create something on GraphQL, it will spin up some database called DynamoDB in the back. And you can get Elasticsearch if you want to search through data and things like that. You can also use AWS Lambda function if you want to access your other server or something like that. But it's not all. You have real-time data access and updates. In your GraphQL, you can literally subscribe to anything and you'll get real-time updates out of the box. You have offline synchronization and things like that. You even have authorization and authentication out of the box with one command. Nothing, you just need a few minutes to set it up. And it minimizes the backend development and the amount of code that you have. And it's really important for me to have least amount of code. And I have few quotes from Twitter from a guy called Joe Emison, and he says that he only hires front-end developers now. Don't worry if you're a back-end developer, there will be a lot of work for you, of course. But in his startups, and he built like 4 or 5 different startups now, he's the only DevOps, back-end, and mid-tier developer, and he's also a CTO, and he said that with AppSync, he can continue being CTO and work with up to 100 front-end developers. I can't do that, but some people can, of course, obviously. So it's really cool. And another thing that you often want to do is, for example, generating thumbnails and things like that in applications. You have some large images, you want to convert some files and things like that. You can do that easily with serverless. For example, instead of having an API, you can upload your photos to that S3 storage that can trigger Lambda function, because functions can be triggered by anything in serverless. And that function can just take your file, resize it, and put it back to your storage. So you just upload any kind of image, and it will just create the image that you need in the background. And you can use, of course, Claudia or something like that to do that. But we don't want to write like image resizing service again, because we can just reuse it. There's a thing called AWS Serverless Application Repository, which allows you to go there, search for applications. It's such a similar thing to GitHub, but you don't get just the code. You get basically code and infrastructure. You click there, click install, and that's it. You have the service running in your AWS account. You don't basically need to do anything special in the background. Well, I showed a lot of different tools, and they're really nice for many things, but most of you don't really want to learn all those tools, and you just want to use one tool that will give you all these things. And that tool, of course, exists, and it's called Aws Amplify. It's basically a front-end framework connected to some back-end services, and it allows you to basically deploy your application and set up CDN, HTTPS, and things like that with one command and some answering some questions. Then you can use Amazon Cognito with and social sign-ins for like connecting your application with actually having a database of all of your users and things like that. And you can literally do that in 5 minutes. Then you can set up GraphQL backends from with App Sync, again, through that command line interface and get real-time updates and things like that. You can store media on S3. You can have, you can also integrate nice client-side libraries to your React or Vue or Angular application, or even React Native or native Android and iOS. So they did many cool things, and you can do much, much more. And that is the thing that makes you like front-end developer with superpowers. So I was really efficient, so I think we have a few more minutes. Do you want to see a short demo?
Yes.
Okay. Let's see if I can break the demo today. I'll try to turn on my Wi-Fi and to do this. Okay. Kind of works so far. Let me know if something doesn't work. Can you, oops. Okay, this does work. Can you see this? Okay, so let's start. I have an empty directory here, so there's nothing inside. We want to create a really, really simple like API that will just return something in the browser. So to do that, I need to like initialize a new empty like GitHub repository, so just to get package JSON. Then I want to install a thing called Cloudia API Builder. It's an NPM module. I want to save it as a dependency. I probably don't need to do that anymore because it's done by default, but whatever. Then I want to create a file that will, for example, be called API.js. And let's import this library that I just installed. Let me know if you see some typos and things like that. Please don't let me fail with the demo. This is a class, so I'll do something like this, nothing special. Then I want to add one route, which will just go to slash, and let's just return some, for example, some JSON file or something like that. Let's return something like that. And finally, I just want to export this API thing. So that's it. I don't want to do anything else. Now I want to deploy this. I have AWS account and things like that, so I will not set up that. I'll use a tool called Cloudia. You can install it from npm too. I'll do Cloudia create. I'll set region, because everything in AWS is in some regions. I think Frankfurt, which is EU Central 1, is the closest to here. Maybe not anymore, but who cares? And then I need to tell Cloudia what's my initial file, and that's API.js, but I don't need this .js part at the end. So let's try. It will package everything for you, create some roles and things like that, because everything in AWS requires some permissions in the background, and that's really boring thing to do. Cloudia was created because at the beginning in 2015, you needed like a few minutes to write a simple API and probably a few hours to deploy it. So Cloudia is basically just the, oh, it was really fast. Let's write out. So it will give me some URL address, and I'll just go here. And that's it. I have an API. Oh. Thank you. And I have just a quick summary, and that's it. Demo didn't fail, so I don't need this slide. Okay, I mentioned some things, and I put links here. If any one of you want to check them, you don't need to take a photo, but I'll give you some time to take a photo. You can just follow me on Twitter if you want. And I'll tweet the presentation, so you can click on links. You don't need to retype everything. Sorry. Let's go through the really quick summary. So serverless, it's easy to start with. It's beginner friendly. As you saw, you can deploy APIs really fast. You don't need to maintain servers. They still exist, but you don't need to do these boring things. You pay per use because it's that pricing model and it's really cheap. You can deploy single page apps, APIs, GraphQL in minutes, and it gives you superpowers. And the last thing is I have 30 more seconds and I want to show you my book. And yes. That's it. You can follow me on Twitter. I'll tweet everything. I wrote this book about serverless, so whoever wants can get it with 40% discount. I don't think we have time for questions, but whoever asked me the first question after the presentation, I'll give you the free ebook. That's it.
Go. Thank you.
Thanks.
Sorry for all the trouble.
No problem.